Thank you, everyone. So, yeah, title of this presentation, Wait, That's Not Right, AKA Failing Better. So as quality engineers, I see our job kind of as being professional skeptics. Right? We're given software and we don't believe that it works. We need to be convinced. This gives us a really interesting relationship with the truth. And one of the biggest problems that we run into is not knowing what that truth is. And this becomes much, much harder when you don't have an effective test data management strategy. So if you're going to get anything from this talk, just know you really, really, really want to do this. In order to have effective test data, it needs to be first sufficient. It needs to cover what you're testing, right? If I need to test a admin user, I should probably have an admin user. It also should be representative. Random data in your testing environments, not necessarily a good thing. To a certain extent, it is nice to have some randomness in there, but it should look something like what your production environment's going to look like. What your production environment does or will look like. When you're getting new features, this is part of an effective test data management strategy, is ways to get this data in before you can actually pull it from production. You also want it to be reproducible and automated. I actually worked on a project where we had one lady, she'd spend 3 days each sprint manually entering all of our test data. And a good share of the time, it was wrong. I mean, she'd get like 95% sometimes, which was really good. But anytime you filed a bug, it was the data's problem. And then for automation, you really want to make sure that your data is deterministic, if at all possible. Because when you're writing automation, you don't want to put a whole bunch of error handling around what's going on, right? You want to find the problems. You don't want to have code that will always pass. That does no good. That's actually worse than not testing at all. And then you want it to be legal, ethical, safe. And that's a long-winded way of saying don't just use your production data. Depending upon what industry you're in, this might be flat out illegal. Medical software, don't do this. Banking, don't do this. You're making your own data breach. And when you have good test data management, this gives you credibility. So the lady on the right here is Cassandra. So when I talk about test data management, the thing that always comes to mind is the story of Cassandra. So this is, I believe, Greek mythology. Cassandra, she was gifted with foresight. She could see the future. Which it's Greek mythology, so there's going to be a rub. Some god got mad. So she was still given the gift of foresight, but she was cursed that nobody would believe her. And I think this is what we run into in the QA realm a lot, where we find this bug. I mean, how often have you guys found a bug in your QA environment and devs are like, not a bug, test data problem, never happened in production. Next week goes out to production, clients start yelling about that very same bug. So what does it take to have good test data management? And this is where I'm going to stop on test data management because it kind of flows into the rest. This can be a talk in and of itself. I actually did this talk 3 weeks ago at another conference. But in order to have good test data management, it is a collaborative effort between quality, development, and operations. Right? You need to have a way to get the data into the system. You have to have a way to deploy it. You have to make sure that it's actually the right data. Don't worry if you're starting from scratch, you don't have a test data management strategy. If you just we have a bunch of servers that people manually put things in. There are a lot of tools that can help you out with this. And I will let those vendors convince you which of them is the best. Or none of them is the best. One of the other vendors is better. But these are really valuable tools when you're dealing, especially with complex data. Okay, so you're like, okay, I know. I know I need test data management. I have something. It's working for now. So what about testing? What about seeing something that's just not quite right when you're testing? Well, as a manual tester, you're presented with a couple of challenges. One of the first ones is this thing that I'm seeing actually a bug? Because I know developers that can see any bug as a feature. As long as they wrote the code, it's a feature. And you have to be able to to defend this position. You have to logically be able to say, this is a bug, here is why it's a bug. Here's what's going wrong. And then you have to find the kind of the superficial problem. What happened here? Is this a data issue, application? Is one of my third-party integrations not working? It can be a lot of different things. And then the truly great automation, not even automation, quality engineers that I've worked with, they will try to find root cause. They will look and critically think, is this the bug, or is this a symptom of something that's more profound, something worse in the system? Well, I don't care about that. You can go away. Yeah, is this something more profound in the system? If you're unethical, you can also use this to bump your numbers of bugs. I've had engineers that have done this as well, where you find the root cause, then you figure out all the places it touches, then you can write a ton of bugs and look really, really smart for, you can get away with it like a month, and then your boss catches on. Once you get this information, you want to present it somehow. And there are a lot of different ways of presenting this data. And this is kind of a typical format. How you present your bugs might be different. You might not even call them bugs. They might be issues, whatnot. But this is the basic information you're going to want. You want some kind of summary of, here is the thing that's going on. You'll also want context. This might just be a Chrome problem, or more likely, this is just an IE problem, so we don't care. This might be a resolution problem. Is this a mobile app? Is this responsive design? What conditions are we getting this? You note I have time, and specifically UTC. Use UTC time, the universal time you really, really, really want to. This gives your engineering team really, really strong information, exactly when this happened. Without the exact time, they have lots of logging in their system, and they won't be able to figure out where this problem comes in. There's just too much data. And then, of course, users and whatnot. And then you want steps. How did this thing happen? How did I get to this point? And then beyond that, you want expected results, actual results. What was I expecting to see? What did I see? And then any related artifacts. So depending upon what you're using for your testing tool, like a lot of them will record your session, so they'll take screenshots as you go along, and you can attach those. You can also get like server logs and all that kind of data. Whatever data you can give back to the development team, the better. That's great for manual testing, but automation doesn't necessarily do all this stuff, right? It doesn't know enough to look for the root cause. It doesn't necessarily have steps. It doesn't put things in this kind of format. So you have to make it, right? As an automation engineer, that is part of your job. So what makes a truly good automation framework or automated test? They are frameworks and tests that are designed to fail. When a test passes, nobody cares. How much time do you spend looking at your past tests? Almost no time. Nobody ever does. So you care about the failures, and you are going to spend a lot of your time looking at those failures and trying to figure out what actually happened. Is this the automation? Is this a change requirement? Is this actually a bug? Is this a real problem? So how do we address this in automation? First piece, make sure you have some kind of logging mechanism. Thankfully for most of us, we are building our automation on top of some kind of testing framework. You'll see in the right there, I have an example using MS Test for C# and TestNG in Java. There's a report logger for TestNG. But pretty much any testing framework you use will have some kind of logging mechanism. If you made your own and you didn't add logging, add logging. That's now on you as well. That's what you get for making your own testing framework from scratch. But you have complete control over it, so there's that. So this logging, it allows you to add context. What exactly is going on in my test? You can add comments, like here's the step that I'm at, here's what I'm doing. You can add useful messages, and if you're doing this right, you're also hooking into your exceptions and assertion libraries. So you can capture those messages. And that gives you the what was I expecting and what did I see. And then in some cases, these test artifacts, you can actually use them for some regulatory requirements. Depending on what industry you're in, you may or may not need to prove you actually ran a test. And you actually need these logs to say, yes, I ran these tests at this time. But we can do better. And especially with Selenium, Selenium gives you something called an event firing WebDriver. If you haven't heard about this, it's awesome. I really, really, really want it in Appium. They haven't implemented it yet, but I've heard it's coming. And what this does is it allows you to hook into all of the Selenium events. And what you might not know is most of those Selenium events are actually multiple events. So you can hook into all of them. So there's the find. Find, you actually say, find that thing for me, then you get the response back, I found this thing or I didn't find this thing. And then you can put really good logging around that. And that gives you, here are the exact steps that I followed in order to get to this point. And yeah, really, really good, powerful logging. Note about this, when I'm writing any of my automation frameworks, I will specifically implement event firing, even if what I'm using doesn't have event firing. So I will wrap like web service calls and database calls, so I can see exactly what did I send and what did I get back. Because if you don't capture that information, it's going to be really, really hard to figure out, was this a bug? Was this, what was this? Is this a data issue? Is this a service issue? What's going on? And yeah, I have, once again, the C# and Java. It's Selenium, so it works for any of the testing frameworks. I'm not much for JavaScript, but would have been easy enough to put in there. And that's the great thing about Selenium. Kind of take whatever you want. You can also get screenshots. So screenshots, and actually you can also get the entire page source, roughly the same way. And there's a few things as powerful as getting a screenshot, right? Having that picture of what was on the screen at this point in time. Yeah, and I know there's another session going on right now where they're talking about headless browser testing. The really cool thing is you can get screenshots for those. IE is actually the hardest one, which even doesn't even run headless. IE is terrible, but I digress. You can capture these in multiple formats, and this is important because where's this data going? There are and there can be like size limitations. You might not want to do bitmap for each one of them. You might not want to do PNG. Maybe JPEG is the right thing for you. So that gives you a lot of flexibility. And then you can also manipulate these, so you can zoom down to, I care about this element. And then you can also do overlays. You can do a lot of really cool stuff with this. But this gives you the power to get to that level. And a lot of the testing frameworks support integration of files like these. So you can attach log files, so flat files, images, so on and so forth. And yeah, if you're using one of those reporting frameworks, works very slick. But you can do even better. So what about the problems that you run into when I don't see a problem? Something's not working, but I can't see what it is. You can actually get browser logs. So you can go down and get the non-visual errors. Word of warning about this: this is 90% Chrome. I think this used to work for Firefox. I'm a little iffy on whether this works for them anymore. Absolutely works on Chrome. Basically, it's going off and it's getting the data from your developer console. So if you F12 in a browser and you look at the errors and warnings, that's basically what's coming back here. And I don't know how many times I've been able to use this to point my developer back and be like, this is the problem. Yeah, it doesn't work with everything. So what's missing, right? Now we have, what were we looking for to begin with? Summary, okay, so we don't exactly make a summary, but you can put the definition of your test case, no problem. Steps to reproduce, okay, we have that. We even have you can do even better. Not only do you get screenshots, unless you turn it off, you're going to get video. So you can get video of your entire test run. Yeah, and video of your entire test run. And yeah, what's more powerful than that? How does a developer say that didn't happen when they can actually see the video of it happening? You can also use extended debugging. Word of warning about this, this will slow you down. This will slow you down quite a bit. This is not something you want to do on your entire suite. I typically do this for flaky areas, trying to figure out where that flakiness is coming in. Or, yeah, flaky areas or specific tests where I want that lower level information. And you can integrate most of these with build servers. Sauce has extensions for all the major build services. So this is an example of Azure DevOps with the Sauce Connect browser Sauce Connect add-in. And what this does is it adds a Sauce Labs tab to your builds. So you can actually embed links to your test runs. And you also get log files and screenshots. This is an anonymous link, so anybody in the team can use it, whether they actually have the Sauce Labs account or not. And then within this, they get the screenshots, they get the commands, what exact steps were taken when, so they can actually replay and go back and say, here is how this test ran. And then they can forward, reverse, whatnot. And if you have, if you have that extended debugging enabled, you'll also be able to get network traffic. So you'll be able to see what calls were made, how long those calls were made, what kind of errors are you getting on the browser side. A really, really nice tool. But once again, if you're going to use that, think about what you're doing first. If you have a big test suite, this will slow you down a lot. But that's Azure DevOps. Most of the people that I meet at conferences, they care 100 and crazy% about Jenkins, because Jenkins is the thing. They also have a add-in for Jenkins. Does pretty much the same thing. Actually, it's a little bit more mature. It gets more love than the Azure DevOps plugin. But they have that for Jenkins. There's one for TeamCity, TeamCity. Bamboo. Bamboo is the one I was looking for. And I think there's one more, but I can't remember that one offhand. Cool. Wow, I'm plowing through this one quick. Okay, so the takeaways. What I'm hoping that you've kind of gleaned from this talk. First, make sure that you have a test data management strategy. If you don't, it's going to be much, much harder to figure out when there is a problem. And if you're writing automation, write it as though you expect it to fail. Failure is a good thing. If you're there's this weird dichotomy in our industry where we want to get to green, right? Everybody wants that green check mark at the end of the day saying, we ran our tests and everything's good, I feel confident. I never feel confident when I see those green check marks. If your entire build is green, that means you're not testing enough. Any software that they're hiring any of us to do should be complicated enough that there's at least one bug, at least one big bug. And if it's not there, we should be worried. That means that we're probably not doing our job. Make sure that you have logging. You want to have this artifact so you can go back to, this is your proof of what happened. How exactly did I run this, and why is this a thing? And take advantage of those advanced logging capabilities. For instance, event firing. If what you're using doesn't have event firing, build it. It's a simple wrapper on top of whatever testing framework you're using. You basically just make it intermediary. Make sure that you're getting screenshots. Make sure that you're getting console logs. If these are available to you and you're not using them, you're doing yourself a disservice. And then if you're using something like Sauce, once again, you have more capabilities here. And if you're not leveraging them, if you're just using Sauce as a de facto grid, still probably a good idea, but you can get so much more out of it. The DevOps integration alone is kind of a killer feature. I use this on a lot of my projects, and if you think about what this does, this puts all of those artifacts at the fingertips of the developers. So if a build fails and it's because of one of these tests, the developer doesn't have to come to me. They go to the test that failed, they can open it. I don't need to be involved at all. I can actually take vacation. I can take a day off. And they don't need that extra, they don't need that middleman to give them the information. And what's really cool is if you put this as part of like a gated check-in, you can get some really good information, and you can prevent those bugs from ever getting into a real environment. And yeah, extended debugging when you need it. Dear goodness, you really, really need it. Yeah, I would be very careful about that. It's like a 25 to 35% overhead to do it, but a lot of really good information. Okay, now everybody write this stuff down and I'll wait for you to finish. Okay, maybe not. I have no idea where these slides are going to go up, but I'm sure these will be available. So the first couple links, these are the testing frameworks. Specifically the ones I was talking about. If you're using JavaScript, Ruby, whatever, they will have their own testing frameworks, and they will have the logging well documented. So first couple are Microsoft, TestNG. And these two GitHub links. One of the best ways to figure out how software is supposed to be used is looking at their unit tests. So when I was trying to figure out how I was actually going to use event-firing WebDrivers, I went to Selenium's unit tests, and that gives you the most accurate information, because I mean that's the way the developers expected them to be used. So I cannot undersell GitHub looking at people's unit tests. I've never found better documentation for anybody's software, because this is the way they want it used. And then there are a couple of links for Sauce Labs. Sauce Labs actually provides a couple of really nice UI components where they will auto-generate little pieces of code for you, so you can set up what browser OS combination do I want. And they do that in multiple languages. And then they have the advanced settings, and this is around what kind of logging you can do if you want to do logging. So you can turn all these features on and off. Like you don't want a video, you can turn it off. If you don't want screenshots, you can also turn that off. And for each of the build servers, so Azure DevOps, browser, why do I keep doing that? Azure DevOps, Bamboo, Jenkins, there's documentation for setting all those up. It's really easy to do. It's like an extra line of code in your tests. It's a trivial thing to get that kind of functionality. And the last one is a link to Magenic's open source framework. We implemented a lot of these ideas kind of based off we want to fail fast, and we want to get this kind of information. And with that, questions?
Raise the hands high. I don't see any. Any questions for Troy? I imagine you're okay with them coming to find you after if they're not comfortable asking.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm going to give you guys a couple more seconds. Any questions? All right, let's get a round of applause for Troy. Thank you so much. Oh, wait, hold on. Okay, we got a question. I'm sorry. It's bright up there.
Yeah, so I have a question is, you mentioned about that we should, help investigate the failure, we should work on our logging CS.
Yep.
So especially for the UI test, most time you get
not just UI.
Yeah. So lots of the things we get the log is they say this element is now found or something like that. So actually, this log is not really tell you the story, what's wrong over there. So from this aspect is how you have any suggestion to improve this kind of the log to really expose the root cause or at least something information exposed there.
Yeah, specifically with elements not found. Well, so there's a certain amount of making your automation a little bit defensive. And what I mean by that is waiting for elements to exist. Right? JSON, Ajax is a thing, and it's not going away anytime soon. So you have things that take a while to load. So you want to extend, or you want to use the fluent waits built into Selenium, or you can also implement your own copy of that. That being said, let's say that you're confident that this thing isn't there. There are a couple of key pieces of information that you want. Obviously, you want the screenshot. I want visible evidence that this button is or is not there, or the element that you're looking for. You also want to make sure that you're getting the page source. Right? The developer will actually want the page. The developer might want the page source, and you might want it too. Because if it's just a problem with your selector, you can use things like, actually there was a presentation earlier, Cheerio.io or HTML Agility Pack, that you can actually go against that HTML page and test your CSS, XPath, whatnot. Answer the question?
Anyone else? Oh, one in the front.
By the way, just a short observation, it sounds like your website is down right now, Magenic.com. So the question is, you mentioned the data-generated tools, and could you take, I'm not really familiar with this technology, could you take us a little bit further and explain how that can work and what it brings to the table? And one more step, you also mentioned that for healthcare companies, for example, the data might not be available because we are HIPAA compliant companies and there is a PHI involved. Are there any data-generated tools which allows you to generate HL7 messages?
Yes, and different parts of those tools will have different modules for that. So these can work in different ways. Some of them actually record your, they'll actually scrub your data. So they'll look at your production and go, okay, we need this kind of data, but we're going to scrub it so it's all the PII, personally identifiable information, is gone. And that takes care of part of it. They also do data generation, and in some cases, some of the more spendy ones will also do service virtualization. So let's say that you're, I don't know, connecting to PayPal. So you can record that traffic, then you can put logic behind that to say what happens under different circumstances. So that way you don't actually need that third-party service. And this gets used a lot when you're dealing with third parties that charge you money, a lot of money, to use their APIs, and/or they don't have siloed test environments. So yeah, that service virtualization, the ones that do that are really nice. Cool.
All right, if there are no more questions, let's get a round of applause for Troy.
Thank you.